Um, Thank you very much for joining the session. Today we are going to be talking about shifting requests or Atlassian requests left. So it's a bit of a lesson in some self-service, some Atlassian automation, but hopefully a lot of this is food for thought for your future and kind of maybe where you may want to do some more automations yourself. We obviously will be doing Q&A towards the end. Feel free to put in questions throughout the session, and we will answer them towards the end, not through, if that's okay. Sweet. Okay, let's crack on then. So just a few seconds about me. My name is Dan Toombs. I am currently the Atlassian architect for a company called Inmarsat, and we basically build and maintain satellites in space for satellite communication. So, quite fun stuff. Well, I think so anyway. I'm a bit of a space nerd, so I love that. I've been in the Atlassian ecosystem for about 8 years now. The first 4 were at a solution partner where I was a consultant. And then the latter 4, I've actually spent in end customers, being able to kind of really get into the nitty gritty stuff with challenges and kind of see projects through rather than just being from an advisory role. But in the latter 4 years, obviously, our job as Atlassian admin is to keep the lights on and make sure that everything is running as smoothly as it can. But when we're not doing that, obviously, we should be innovating. Technology is not slowing down, and nor can our systems. Our processes and business has to adapt as much as the world around us. And it's actually through some of those times, where our business is done like hackathon days and stuff like that, that we have kind of got the session outlined for you today. So before we actually get into talking about some of the automations, I just want to talk through some of the boring theory stuff. Now, I'm not sure how many people may be aware of what the shift left mentality is, but realistically, when you're talking about ITSM, the shift left mentality is about effectively removing the resolution left, i.e. closer to the original requester. So moving it to that front line, the operational front line. So in some respects where you may be kind of escalating a ticket from your L1 to your L2 team would do some work, whether it's write a knowledge base, do some automations and changes, but they would ultimately kind of do some work and present that back to the L1 team, and then they would be able to take it on from there. So why would you want to do that? Now, yes, there is some upfront cost, and that is just something that's going to have to be accepted by the business. But that upfront cost for your level 2 team to spend time making those little changes or doing some maintenance on some documentation if things change is far less than the actual cost of them continuing to do that process themselves. So it's really important sometimes to do that upfront investment in order to then actually save time in the long run. Outside of that, you are educating your teams and obviously creating better education within engineers. I mean, engineers always love to learn. They always want to know what's going on. So you're going to boost morale within your teams. You're going to build, you're going to be able to retain better knowledge because you're spreading that knowledge out to others. And you might find some great innovative ideas come out of the teams that you're educating. So that's also really important. Apart from that, some more business kind of perspectives. You will be, by shifting those things left, you are freeing up the more expensive resources to actually focus on the more strategic items rather than being stuck with escalated work, which none of us really want to do. But ultimately, with all that said and done, shifting left will speed up your resolution times, which means better hit SLA targets, which means happier customers and better relationships, which ultimately is a better end user experience. So kind of it's a win-win, really kind of like all around. And I think that's really important. Now, yes, this study is a little old, but the point still stands. But back in 2017, MetricNet actually did a bit of a study. Now, this study looked at the total cost of ownership when you're resolving some issues. And across the industry, it actually found that every time you escalate one level, you are increasing the cost about 5 times. So, every time you push from, let's say, your service desk to your desktop support, it's going to cost you about 5 times more. But the benefit is actually going even further when you go to self-service and go past L1 into that, where the requesting sort things out themselves, and it's actually only about 10% of L1 support time. So that's really, really important. Now, there are 3 key elements to the shift left mentality. That is IT self-service. So exactly what it says on the tin, the user go there and do something, some sort of action, and resolve it themselves. There is knowledge management, which by far is obviously the most common thing and is the backbone of any good service team. We need that knowledge shared, whether it's with troubleshooting guides or how-to guides, but that's really, really important. And then the third is automation. Now, we can often overlook that, and that is usually because people class it as too costly to implement, but it's really valuable and definitely something we should invest in. So let's take a look at that first key element, shall we? Now, self-service, if you look up the definition for it, is any system in which customers are not served by the employee, but can collect goods or foods themselves. And if you remove the food bit, it's a pretty good explanation of exactly what self-service is for IT. So what does that actually mean? Well, the first notion, as we've said, is obviously go straight to knowledge bases, and they are really, really key. People, when they go to things, they can see, oh, there's some articles. Maybe if I read those, I can follow the steps and I can self-serve that way. But actually, we tend to kind of stop there. While that is really solid and important, we don't really look further. And sometimes that's a bit of a shame, because actually we can do so much more when we use the other elements as well to offer more value to our customers. And we use this in our day-to-day lives now. I mean, I'm sure we've all been to McDonald's and used the self-service machines over going to a counter. That's self-service in a nutshell with some automation in there. And the other aspect is ATMs, those automated teller machines. It's freed up banking or bank time with tellers and going into branches massively. And it means we can get more value out of being with that bank because they have ATMs everywhere, Next, I want to kind of skip over the knowledge because, I feel like we all have a really good understanding of that aspect, and go to the last key element. Now, that is automation. And of course, automation is incredibly broad. So I'm going to narrow it down slightly, and we're going to talk just about the Atlassian environment. Now, there are 3 key areas where you can get some automation within Atlassian in terms of the ecosystem. The first is native functionality, and the biggest area of that native functionality is, of course, Jira Automation, or what was CodeBarrel's automation for Jira before it was acquired. Now, that is a low-code, no-code automation engine. It obviously is primarily no-code, but with some additional low-code stuff if you look at it later. It's got a huge benefit into the fact that it is native, so there's no additional reliance on technology or things to exist, etc. And just because it means, it is no code, low code, doesn't mean that it is any less powerful. Sometimes that gets overlooked, but again, it's quite key. The second is workflow automations. So they tend to be marketplace apps. Now, your business probably does use them, even if you're not sure, but things like Jira Suite Utility, so JSU, or Jira Miscellaneous Workflow Extensions, JMWE, both AppFire apps, pretty much in every single aspect of Jira nowadays. But realistically, they allow us to extend the functionality within our workflows. So those predefined actions, those transitions through those statuses, we can add so much more functionality with those apps, whether it is post functions or conditions and validators, automating in that kind of level, that's really benefit by those marketplace apps. Now, again, JMWE and JSU are more towards the low code functionality. A lot of it is kind of click through. There is some more technical stuff, but it's okay. It's not the end of the world. So you're not kind of really introducing a huge amount of tech debt by doing that. And the final one is scripting. Now, scripting definitely has its place, and I'm not here to tell anybody different. That's not the point. But I definitely think, that there's a time and a place to use it. Now, if you are looking for an Atlassian-based scripting option, you kind of have two options, really. You have ScriptRunner, which I'm sure most of you have heard of. It's by Adaptivist and uses Groovy as its scripting language. Or you've got PowerScripts, which is an AppFire app, which uses something called SIL, which is Simple Issued Language. So yeah, again, you have your two options there. Now, both of those are marketplace apps. So again, there is some reliance on additional third-party technology to exist because Atlassian does not have its own scripting engine to do those actions there. With scripting, it is truly endless in terms of the possibilities that you can do with integrations to other systems or trying to work with different technologies and things like that. However, it does carry the most amount of tech debt. And tech debt we'll come on to in a little bit. But the whole point is that, we, as a business, we are always trying to remove tech debt wherever we can. We don't want to build reliance. We don't want to build bottlenecks because, all these things exist. And obviously, because it requires a coding language over low code or no code options, again, there's additional reliance on people to know the right coding language and having the right skills. So, there's lots more barriers to things like this. And ultimately, we don't want to be spending time maintaining something if we're not then getting the benefit out of it as much. Again, so that's the whole point of being in debt. But this talk is using the native functionality. So we are primarily going to be looking at just that automation for Jira stuff. So on that, I wanted to obviously call out some major importance for the low code, no code kind of world in automation. Very simply, as I've mentioned before, it is the idea of basically using predefined building blocks, so standard stuff, and most of them come as kind of when, if, then that kind of statement builders, or if this, then that, you may have also heard of. So the idea of like, when this particular trigger happens, go ahead and do some sort of action. And again, you can obviously add some conditions. If you've used it before, you'll know, but you can add conditions to help kind of filter out the right results you're looking for. The importance and rising popularity of low code, no code, they cannot be understated. Now, Gartner back in 2021 actually showed that no-code automation engines were growing very rapidly, and they are bringing around, on average, about a 23% increase in productivity for each individual teams. So, there's, I don't know a single business and a single user that wouldn't like that additional 20% in productivity, where they can kind of stop doing all that kind of stuff that no one really wants to do and push that to automation. Now, by being a no-code or low-code engine, you are reducing your technical debt because you're building less reliance on individuals that know specific languages or things like that. The platform is easier to understand, and as I've mentioned before, it is not any less powerful. There is still a lot of functionality we can do in there. And one of the big benefits when we just relate that back to Atlassian is that we, as Jira automators, we can do that as project admins, which means that we don't have to rely on your system admins to be available to write those rules. So again, we've got that kind of balance between project admins and being able to automate the system. So again, where we can kind of boost the number of people that can write these things, we are again reducing bottlenecks. So it's really, really important wherever we can, again, to kind of push this model. So combining those two thoughts. So now is where we're going to again relate back to our Atlassian stuff. So we've looked over the importance of the shift left mentality and the options for automating within this environment. Now, combining those, we have some really key points that I want to make sure that you guys take away with you. Automating common requests will free up time for your high level resources, you want maybe technically skilled resources to spend time actually managing and maintaining your environment, or innovating and finding new and better improvements for your team. So that's really, really important. Automating things also means that your teams are not spend time doing mundane items. That we all, as again engineers or agents or whatever you may want to class yourself as, we want to do exciting stuff, things that we can really get involved in. So that doesn't mean spending time sitting there and doing the things that a computer could do. Automation is a key element of shifting left. So by doing that, we are making sure that we are providing as much opportunity to shift left. And the biggest thing that I want to make sure you take away is we should never be afraid to automate. It is incredibly important that we embrace the world. We've seen with the introduction of AI and Atlassian intelligence in this space that there is going to be a complete change in how we may look to do certain actions. So we should never be afraid to automate, but we should definitely be always asking ourselves, which is it worth automating? How much time are we spending doing some sort of task, so that we can work out what the possible debt situation, debt versus, profit. We need to make sure we do that. Now, the first way to do it is look, obviously, to see where you're spending time. So look at your current data and work out where you're spending time dealing with certain requests. And you'll be able to group that up and look at the results. And it may be different for every team. But once you do, work out, use a test system, or if you've got certain aspects, you may want to use those as well. But look and start trialing. There is nothing wrong with failing at all, because it's a lesson, not a failure. And that's, I think, really important. But look and try and come up with some sort of automation that can scale. We don't want our future selves to not like us very much. We want to make sure that whatever we build will scale. Once you've got that, introduce it to your team and show that off to your team as well, and show the benefits and make sure they understand how things should work as well, so they can spot if things are going to fail, and then communicate, document. We still need to make sure that we do that, and then we can release and start looking for the next one. Now, some examples that I have found over the time that's gone on. Temporary admin requests are incredibly important. We, in my business, are lucky that we have some great resources that are able to administer Jira, but none that the business may want to kind of permanently have access to do that kind of stuff. So we have the ability to set up some temporary admin request functionality. Project or space creations, as well as archiving those things, every bit of content that we make, whether it's within an issue or some pages in Confluence, has a life cycle. And if we can automate project or space creation, as well as archiving it, then everyone gets it. We can offer some level of freedom, but also make sure that our systems are clean, and again, make sure that they're well maintained. Some other areas are updating custom fields, and looking at additional selector options or things like that, and adding users to groups. So those are some key ones. Now, there are two examples that I want to walk through today. And the first one is actually temporary admin requests. So I'm just going to switch to the first one. So let's go big screen. Hopefully you can still see that. Please let me know if you can't. Hopefully you should see some mouse and moving around. But let's start again. So now it's going to load, hopefully. Okay, perfect. Obviously, now once you set up your project, whether you choose to have the same one or not, we want to make sure that we choose one particular issue type to work from. And that is because we are going to be using a workflow, and we want to make sure that we always use that same workflow for everything. Now, within automation options, you kind of need a really simple workflow. The first is being able to use approvals. There we go. Yeah, so you'll need an approval step, because there will be some automations that you create that you'll want that second eyes on. You need an action status, which in this case we use in progress. You want an on hold status, and then your two resolution statuses, depending on how things go. Now, as I said, we're going to start with the temporary admin request one. So go ahead and make your request type. Now, for this one, you'll see in a second that we actually have multiple sites. So again, we are using to reflect those multiple sites options. We're using the affected services field within service management projects. And also that you'll see that we are using the components field to map the multiple products, so Jira or Confluence or things like that. So you might need to go ahead as a prerequisite and set those up in those fields. You may also not need them depending on your environment and setup. But as you can see, again, affected services and components isn't very user-friendly. So we've gone ahead and make sure that not only are they required, because we'll need to know which actions to set, but we'll also need to make sure that people understand what they should be inputting in those fields. So we've given them nice names. Now, throughout the rest of the stuff, you can see that we also provided description and due date as required, because we'll need to know why they want it for the level of approval. And we're also going to need to know how long they want it for so that we can take it away when the right time is. And once you've done that, we can actually head on to automating, which is the fun bit that kind of we all want to look at. Now, this is one that we internally obviously wanted those second pairs of eyes at. So we use the issue transition trigger, and we set to make sure that it only looks at when it goes from approval to in progress to action. And as you can see here, we're actually adding, because again, we'll use the same issue type and things over and over again, we want to make sure that we are looking for just this specific request type so that it runs properly. So we'll call out request type equals temporary admin access. And then we come into some more fun stuff with the if-else statements. Now, because, as I said, we are running multiple affected services on multiple sites, the first thing that we want to do is call out and understand which site that we want to target so that it can kind of go down the right tree. So that's the first thing. And then also, because we have multiple products on each site, we want to use the branching and apply additional conditions to look for where the components match the right one. So you can see that's what we've gone ahead and started on that tree on the left-hand side just here. Now, once we've done that, we can use the Jira API documentation and using the send web request action. And with that, we can just make sure that we fill in the web request URL that you can see here. So it's your site name, REST API 3, and then we are making sure we're targeting the right group. Now, this group ID, I'm just going to stop it a second. The group ID should, if you go into Atlassian Access, you may need some help here. But if you look into your Atlassian Access, in the URL, when you click on the desired admin group, so whether that's Jira administrators, Confluence administrators, site admins, whatever that may be, in the URL, you'll have the group ID as the last thing. So you just need to put that bit in there. Apart from that, we go ahead and fill in some headers just to make sure that the biggest thing is obviously we need to make sure that our key is valid. And then according to the API, this is a post HTTP method. So we would select that, and then we want to add in the custom data for this. Now, again, if you refer back to the API docs, it will ask you to use the account ID and as the option. And because we want this to work every single time, no matter who fills it in, we can use Jira Automation Smart Values to go ahead, and again, I've just paused there, to make sure that we are inputting the data from the ticket that's caused this to happen. So that is done by two curly brackets either side, and then issue dot whatever the value that you're looking for. In this case, we're looking for a reporter. Oh, did not mean to do that. There we go. So we can go ahead and carry on now. Now that is a great first option. Now, obviously, the more tools you have, so in this case, I'm using both Jira and Confluence in my stuff, I will go ahead and use the duplicate functionality for that branch and go ahead and just make the slight tweaks that I may need to do. So in the web request, you'll need to change the group ID if they're different, and obviously you'll need to change any conditions to make sure that you're choosing the right data. Now, you can go ahead and turn this on, and it would work fine. But one thing that we haven't done is actually close those tickets, because we need to make sure that we are keeping our environment clean. So not only are we going to close the ticket, but as you can see, we're also commenting, because we want to also keep the user up to date of what's happening. They don't want to just see their ticket close and all of a sudden, because they won't know what's going on. So again, we can place a nice message. using data from the ticket to tell them and keep them up to date. And again, as you'll see, we also then are using the transition. And because this is a temporary admin thing, and we'll come on to how we remove it in just a second, we're placing this ticket on hold. Perfect. Okay. We've done the first bit. That's brilliant. We've got the approval step. But how do we go ahead and revoke it when the time is right? Now, you can see here, again, I just copied the rule because it's going to save me a little bit of time. And I'm going to now change the trigger to a schedule because we want to run a schedule every single day to now check to see, are there any tickets on hold? And you don't see it in this. This is a failure in my recording, so I'm sorry. But you'll also want to see if the due date has now passed. So you'll have to add that little bit into the JQL that was missed. Once you've done that, obviously, we still want to keep the user informed. So we're going to actually change the comment now to reflect that we're taking this away. And we want to transition that ticket to done. So that way it doesn't keep running the automation and we keep that environment clean. Then, again, we need to update the web request because if you refer back to the Jira API docs, you'll see that it's slightly different. Now, when we're taking people out of a group, what we actually need to do is switch to no body. We need to move to a delete HTTP method, and we need to add that bit in blue, which I will just go back 1 second so I can show you, which is and account ID equals the reporter. Once you've done that, you're all set. So if you repeat those steps for all of the different actions that you have, all those different things, you can do that. Now, just to show this in practice, you can see here, this is actually taken from our live system. So you can see all the different options that we currently have built in some areas. And this is the one that we're going to want to take away. So if we go ahead and click on the temporary admin request, and then we would fill this in. So I'm just going to fill this in. I'm going to select the fact that I want to use that Inmarsat site, and we're going to use for Jira. And again, this is just a test ticket. Now, in theory, you would not have yourself approve the ticket. And again, if you look in your Jira workflow, you can actually stop that happening. But just because it's a demo, I've gone ahead and approved it myself. Now, if we give a quick refresh to our screen, you'll actually go ahead and see that it has moved the ticket to in progress. That's when I approved it. It's posted my lovely message, and I've moved the ticket to on hold. So we can see that that's now, the actions have taken place. And again, those web requests would have gone off and fired. So that is the first one. So just as a quick recap, we saw that we can have both automations that run on a schedule. We've seen things that are triggered based on transitions. We've included particular conditions so that we're calling out the right request types at the right time. And we're using other conditions to kind of make sure that we're kind of filtering the right web request to happen at the right time. So they're really key. Now we're going to move on to the other really, really common one that we have internally here at Inmarsat. And I'm sure you guys have it as well. Now, Jira project creation. There are so many options that we can have with Jira project creation. We've got different project types. We've got different project types of types. So, it can get a bit of a minefield, but we want to make sure it's as easy as possible. So again, we're going to use the same issue type that we used last time in the same workflow. So I don't need to show you those, but we're going to go ahead and make sure that we create the request type using those details. Now, on this, we're actually going to use Jira Forms. So on the actual request type that we're doing here, I'm only dragging over the fields that I want hidden. So approvers, if they're set ones you want to do, or if this comes through as different priorities or different things based on some of that data you just want to report on. So again, I'm just making sure that those bits of data are applied. And again, because I don't want the summary to appear on there, I'm giving it a hidden value. Now what we're going to do is actually look for the Jira form. And if you look here, so I've searched for a template, and Atlassian very kindly provided us a new Jira project template that we can use. So that's brilliant. It's a really good starting point. It's not perfect, but it's a starting point. But before I come on to actually building it, I need to make sure that it's going to appear on the right request type. So I've done that, and I've locked the form so that on submission, it stops the editing. And we're going to make sure we need that later on, because obviously you don't want to make those changes as the forms But you see here, we've got project type with all those big giant lists of all the different things. We're going to make sure that we make that required because it's important. We need to know the name, we need to know the key, and the project lead. Those are kind of really the 4 big important things that we need to know every time. And the 5th, if it's applicable, is we need to make sure we know if the project key of a project we want to copy in terms of shared configuration. So those are the big ones. As you can see, I've marked those required. I don't know if you saw it, but actually while we're clicking through on the new project key, I also restricted it to only 10 characters, which is based off of the current the default Jira project key maximum. So you can add in those little bits. If you haven't used Jira Forms before, I highly recommend it. So go ahead and give those a try. Okay, as we go on, you can also see that we can link Jira fields into data. So again, if we need to capture those bits of information, always insert in Jira fields. We can also tie the form field to the Jira field. So that's also really important, as you can see what I did. But I'm almost done editing this form. Again, this is going to be slightly different maybe for your needs. So go ahead and make sure you give it a really good try. Make sure that you're happy with the layout and things like that. But I am happy with this now. Now, in theory, again, we could stop here and it would be a perfectly good form, but we want to automate it. And to automate it, I'm actually going to recommend that you install this entity property tool for Jira. It's free. It's made by Atlassian Labs. And it's going to allow us to see some of that form data straight from the ticket. The other thing is also to automate, it's best to have a test ticket live so we can see some of that data in action. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in a request. And I'm going to, as you can see, I'm using test name, test key, that kind of stuff. So I know which form field relates to which bit of information. Now, if I scroll down to the bottom, you'll now see, because I've added that app, I've also got this entity properties tab at the bottom. And what we're looking for is actually this forms I1 entity. That's what we're going to get all this data in. The first one is relating to the forms that are attached to this ticket. And the second one is that form data. So it's a bit hard to see in this one. So what I'm actually going to do is actually highlight all of that data and just put it into another application. I use VS Code just so that I can see what it looks like. And it's a bit better for me. But, that's your choice. And the bit that we really are interested in is towards the bottom, or when you're coming out this data, and you're looking here for state and then answers, and then where you see the numbers, that's all of the different form fields that you have, which again isn't going to be great for you. You're not going to know necessarily straight away what 148 is. So that's why we've gone ahead, as you can see at 151, labeled them test name, test key, that kind of stuff, because it's going to help us build the rule. Now that we've got our test ticket in place and we've got that data to relate back to in VS Code, we're going to head and create the automation now. So just like we did with the temporary admin request, we want to make sure that we're only transitioning accepted tickets. So we use the same transition trigger as before. And again, we want to make sure that only request types of Jira project creation are moved through this. So that's the first thing. Now, if you think about creating a project live now, if you went to your system, you'll need to know a few bits of information. Are we using shared configuration or are we not? That's the first thing. So we're going to go ahead and use an if-else statement and actually look to see if that form field has any data in. So you can access any of that stuff using some of the smart values again, and you can see the makeup of it here. So issue.properties, and then we're looking for the form that we're after. So that's the pro form of forms I1, state, answers, and then the value, that particular form field that we're looking for. And in my case, it's 155. So that's the order you need to make it in. It's a little bit hidden, but you definitely can find these articles on the community. So if you're not sure, go there. Then, because we want to first of all see only those that contain a value, so we're going to make sure that the first trail is where it's not empty. Go and find me something that basically has a value in. Now, if you refer back to the Jira API documents again, there is a very specific way to create shared configured projects. And it has this particular URL you're seeing me type now. So your site, Atlassian.net, and then we're going to go, come back to this one. Before we do that, we also need to find the project ID and not the project key. So what you're seeing me here is I'm going to make a GET request using the Jira API to go and find me all bits of information about the project key that someone may have entered into that form. So again, I'm just using the API and adding the smart values where I can to make a GET request. And the next thing is that I need to add a variable because I need to action based on some sort of that data returned. So in this case, I'm going to use the web response.body.id because that's going to make the trail down in the JSON. And I'm going to make it called project ID as the variable. Now, if you've not used project variables, the create variable actions before, I highly recommend you do when you're doing things like this because it's going to help you in terms of debugging or providing other results in other areas. It's really, really good there. Now we come on to actually creating the project. Now, again, as I said, it's got a very specific API call and it won't work off project key. So that's why we had to go and find the project ID. Once we've done that, we can use that URL, as you've seen me type, where it's project-template, create shared, and then the project ID we've just grabbed from the previous web request. Now, this is a post option, but it's also got to have a very specific body in the custom data. I'm just going to pause again here. Now, you'll see me in a second go ahead and change the particular smart values used, and that's because of how we've done it internally versus how I'm showing you. And this is quicker because you'll be able to use the Jira form, the Jira form data straight away rather than where we push things to Jira fields. Now, all you need to know for a create shared config is the key, the name, and the lead for it. That's all you need to know. So you can see me just finishing tidy up the previous one here. And again, I'm always referring back to that VS Code so I can make sure I'm choosing the right the Jira form field values. Now that one's done. So we've chosen where we're using share config. So now let's have a look where we're not choosing share config. So again, I've gone ahead and used the duplicate function and I've changed it from where it wasn't empty to now where it is in terms of the condition. You can see that just here. Now, from here, we're now sending another web request, but this one's just the other standard API call that you'll find in the docs. And this time you can also see that we're including so much more information. That's because when you're not creating something, you can include so much more information. You could just leave it again at key, name, lead, but I like to make sure that my projects are properly configured. So we're going to go ahead and add that kind of stuff. So again, you can see me go through, rename to the pro forma form data. So we're always referencing that with key name. And we do the same with the project type and the project type key. So this is really important when you're referring back to those API docs. And if you look at the templated form that Atlassian give you, you'll be able to see where this kind of ties in, whether it's service desk, whether it's a business project or software one, and then whether it's software with Scrum boards or Kanban boards or that kind of stuff. So we can use those options in the form field to then plug straight into our JSON file. And again, there is only one change though when you're using multi-selects within form fields, is that the type, and I'm just coming to it now, I believe, keep going, sorry, it's a little bit slow, is that it changes in terms of the structure. Now, rather than doing, I'm just going to go back a second, rather than doing, as you can see here, scroll down, from state answers and then the value, we need to call out the choice, the option chosen. So you can see here that 150 is actually related to that the Jira project type. So that's the form option. And we want to make sure that we also add in .choices and the value that is chosen from that. So you can see me add that in to the bottom of the smart value that's there. Now, everything at the bottom, so from permission scheme downwards in this particular example, there are some others if you look at the APIs, you can actually customize. So again, you can also specify that every time a new project is created, it must use this permission scheme, this notification scheme, this workflow scheme, and that kind of stuff. So if you already have some standardized config in your area, you can also plug this data straight in. So again, that's going to make sure that your systems stay healthy and that kind of stuff. Now, those are our two examples. So I'm just going to go ahead and flick through those because we've spoken about them. There we go. And we're going to move on just very quickly now to some of the limitations. Now, nothing is perfect, as I've mentioned, but we can, the possibilities are pretty much endless as long as we talk, but obviously everything also has some sort of limitation. The first of all is some level of applications that we're using. Now, I've shown you Atlassian, but this can go so much further. You can you can do things with Okta, AWS, your Azure environments, whatever it may be. But as long as the applications have an API you can work with, that's the first hurdle. We need to make sure that is. The second step is, again, we've talked about technical debt over the course of this session, which is, should we be doing it? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So you still need to make sure that you're not spending time maintaining an automation, so your cost of doing something is higher than the profit you're gaining from actually doing it. That's really, really important. Now, I could speak about kind of technical debt and Atlassian environments for a long, long time, but I'm not going to bore you on that one today. Like I said, there are a few limitations. You may need to check out those API docs. You may need to get a bit more comfortable with some smaller ones to start with. But realistically, your kind of possibilities are endless. Now, I want to thank you very, very much for joining me today. Now, obviously, the floor will now open up for some Q&A if there are any questions going around. But if not, enjoy the sessions that are after this one. And obviously, if you have anything later on, you can feel free to reach me over LinkedIn or scan the QR code, and we can have a chat over some more options. But thank you very much. So let's now move on to some Q&A I've added to the stream. Okay, perfect. So there is a Q&A in here. And the question is, can we use the send web request for sending data to an in-house application other than the Jira Atlassian applications? That is a really good question, so thank you. The answer very simply is yes. Now, there will be obviously some infrastructure-based issues where you may need to make sure your in-house application can see Jira, because it's still going to need to know that bit of information that's being sent. But in theory, absolutely. As long as your in-house system can read that data, can understand what you're inputting, or you put something in place that can do that, yes, there is no limitation in terms of how you can or where you can kind of send the web request functionality. Sorry, that is that one. So let me just double check and make sure. Let me see if there's anything else. That is it so far. If there's any other questions, obviously feel free to reach out. But thank you very, very much for attending. Around there is another question just come in, so I'll give that one a quick read as well. This one says, can we use the form fields for performing math operations? Now, yes, you absolutely can. That functionality does exist. If you Google Jira Automation Smart Values, there is an entire section on being able to do maths in it. So, your basic stuff, you can plus, minus, times, divide. You can also do a lot more more complex things if you need to. Some examples that I've done in the past is that we had a share option scheme where employees could buy shares, but it needed to be worked out based on different currencies. So we did some maths inside the automation to take out the value they said, multiply based on the currency values that we took in from online on a currency converter. So again, yes, you absolutely can do Jira automation and math expressions. Okay, thank you all for joining. We'll call it there with no further questions coming in. If you do have something later on, please feel free to reach out to me via any of the methods you see. But thank you all and enjoy the rest of your JiraCon.